Thanks for joining. And so everybody's on. Um, let's before we introduce our wonderful guest, Paul. I'll introduce the regular host. This is the Privacy Roundtable. We talk about private cryptocurrencies and other technologies that help make cryptocurrency private. And it's hosted by Pivx. I'm Yenachar. I'm part of the Pivx community. Pivx is a proof of stake private cryptocurrency, and the other regular hosts are FIRO with Reuben Yap and Particle with Dr. Cap, and Dr. Cap also represents BasicSwap, which is another host of this. So. Reuben and Dr. Cap, please introduce yourselves and what's new.
Go. Yeah, I guess I'm Reuben, the Pivx with FIRO. We are, I guess, a long time OG privacy coin. We've been behind some of really important privacy protocols, and yeah, I'd love to talk about the privacy stuff in these roundtables.
Okay, great. Dr. Cap.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cap, aka Kapil Amarasinghe. I'm one of the lead advisors to BasicSwap DEX and its parent project, the Particle project. BasicSwap DEX is what I'm going to start calling the world's most private, decentralized, and secure atomic swap DEX. And also, I think I know we met our host, so I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Cap. And so let's move on to our esteemed guest, Paul Pui he's the CEO of Edge Wallet, and I know Paul, Edge Wallet is a lot more than a wallet, so we're eager to hear your take on Edge and privacy. I know you're a big privacy advocate, and what's happening with Edge.
Hey everyone, yeah, I'm Paul Pui, CEO and co-founder of Edge. You're right that Edge is more than a wallet. I'd like to say that wallets don't really describe what apps do in the general cryptocurrency space, but we do have a strong focus on privacy. We're open source. We've integrated quite a few different privacy chains, several of which with their full privacy protocol embedded. And yeah, we've been building since 2014. So we definitely have good experience with many different cryptocurrencies and blockchains, and trying to deliver privacy, what I would call to the masses, as opposed to just privacy for the people that care. And so we're trying to find that right balance between the user experience and the privacy and security that crypto is really meant to deliver.
Right. Yeah. Your wallet is awesome, Paul. It's nice and slick, and it's very unique in its features. The way it handles private keys and so forth. The user doesn't have to. You go in and you log in. You pick a complex password, and then the app handles the keys if you want it to. One thing I've often, and you mentioned your open source. I mean, all that's great. That's wonderful. The open source aspect. One thing I've often wondered about Edge is your business model. So you have investors. Maybe tell us a little bit about your business model. What is where are you seeking revenue? What do you see as your moat? I mean, you've got great branding. Is there anything else that is your moat? What's your business model?
Yes, the business model is twofold. Number one, it's a pretty similar business model to some of our competitors in that we offer buy, sell, and swap services within the app through partners and through other decentralized exchanges. We do take a cut on the spread from those transactions. And of course, we don't take anything from any just standard send and receive transactions. So buy, sell, and swap, and to a lesser degree, staking does generate revenue for us. And the combination of all of those generate a vast majority of the revenue for the company. In addition, we also do license out the platform, since the app is actually built in a couple layers. One is the actual UI. It's that application you install on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And then another is the SDK, which is also open source. But the SDK is what handles a lot of the private key management, encryption, account creation, backup, two-factor protection, and coordinating that with a backend. And so we license out the back end with like API keys for other people and other projects to use that ties in nicely to the SDK. So we do have just a handful, because we don't market this very heavily, but we have a handful of other companies using our SDK technology and backend to be able to build their own cryptocurrency-based applications that can obviously also send, receive, and swap various cryptocurrencies. Although we're excited about this SDK long term because it can drive privacy to beyond cryptocurrencies, and that people can build just any application that can store encrypted data and have that data automatically backed up and synchronized between the different devices that a user might log into. So it's a piece of our business model. It's not a heavy part of it yet, although anyone out there interested in building an app that has encrypted, backed up, synchronized data can consider using Edge. Happy to chat with those people as well.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. There's I can think of a lot of applications for that moving encrypted data. What are some of your like top use cases, or when you talk about this with
So
others?
for the use cases that we foresee being used are any type of apps that have client-side generated data. So a word processor, like a Word doc type of application. Think of like a Google Suite, except that Google doesn't hold all of the data and can see all of your documents and spreadsheets and whatnot. Instead, one where all that data is encrypted client-side, but then synchronized between devices. That's one use case of a financial app like QuickBooks or Quicken, Zero. Those type of applications are all cloud-based nowadays. But having
Hmm.
a cloud-based app, but it's all client-side encrypted and backed up, and as well, even possibly a password manager. In a way, our architecture works somewhat similar to a password manager, but we call it a password manager on steroids because we put far more effort into the security than a standard password manager would. And the beauty about this ecosystem of apps is all these apps, if built properly, can actually have a single account that a user can sign into all the different apps without having to create another Edge account, another Edge account. They're all in the same ecosystem of Edge accounts that can single sign on to multiple apps, but not be the single sign on that you would trust with a Twitter, a Facebook, or Google. Instead, these are encrypted, private, single sign-ons such that Edge itself cannot sign you in. Like we can't backdoor and say, oh, this user Reuben, I see that he signed into this, password manager app. Well, we'll go and sign in the background and look at his data. We can't do that the way Google and Facebook and Twitter could with whatever apps you sign into using those specific services.
Right. That sounds great. It sounds like there's a little bit of an element of competing with IPFS in there, but it's more powerful maybe because one thing with IPFS is it can be hard like to exchange like encryption keys with somebody you don't know, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's less of a competitor to IPFS, and instead it could be an enabler of IPFS. Because if you think about what Edge is, it is a key manager that encrypts and backs up keys for all your cryptocurrencies. Keys are just data. We can encrypt and back up, by and large, any data. And so all the data in Edge, such as the metadata, the settings of the app, are also encrypted and backed up. But if you wanted to use IPFS for your application that you build on top of Edge, you could store IPFS keys inside of a user's account.
Mhm.
And those are the keys that are encrypted and backed up. So the user never sees IPFS keys. They just see whatever data is stored in IPFS. And when they log in into a new phone, they automatically get those keys, and those keys can then authenticate to IPFS and grab whatever data is necessary.
Yeah, cool. Very nice. Well, so I can tell, Paul, that you work a lot with privacy. You believe in privacy, and one thing I wanted to take the opportunity in this call to ask you, like kind of your personal philosophy on why private cryptocurrency and privacy in general is needed. Why go with privacy coins, say, versus transparent coins? I know you've worked with Bitcoin too. Why should we be here and discussing this, and why is it important?
So I believe similar to a lot of the people probably here in this X space is about privacy from the ideological point of view that privacy is necessary in order to achieve freedom. If you don't have the the privacy to transact individually between who you want to expose whatever secrets you have, then you don't quite have that freedom that you would expect, because now governments can see everything that you do, and seeing everything you do is a very easy way to compromise who you are as a person. So there's a lot of the ideology, but I'd like to describe it from a very more practical to the layman that even doesn't care about privacy, the kind of person that posts everything they do on TikTok and Instagram and whatnot, and say, well, why should you care about private cryptocurrencies or privacy in general? And so I like to tell those people, like, well, number one, crypto is in some ways less private than your standard Venmo transaction. And so if you think about Venmo, I can send you money, you can send me money, but we obviously don't ever see the future transactions or past transactions that person has done with other people. With a crypto, you either do or can at least see a portion of it, and obviously through blockchain analytics can extrapolate a vast majority of the remainder of what you don't immediately see. And so that analogy that you'd say to someone's like, hey, you go to a corner store and buy a 6-pack. Well, that store knows how much money you have other than just the transaction you sent them. As well, you potentially could know how much money the store has and how much they've received in the past. And so that kind of information is generally not shared through a traditional finance payment method, although the companies might see it, at least on a peer-to-peer level. We don't share that information. And that immediately will probably resonate with a lot of people going, wow, that's weird. I'm sharing my whole balance, of a crypto just by paying someone or just by receiving money. Um, and then you take that to another level and say, well, why don't you care to share that balance? A lot of people, they have got their own reasons, but you can give them another one by saying, well, do you want to know how much you have and potentially be a personal attack risk? Do you want to become that physical risk by sharing how much you have? Because by doing that, you become a target. And so obfuscating or hiding how much physical wealth you have is a security measure beyond privacy. And that's something that people can definitely resonate with, right? Like
Right.
they don't want to be attacked. It's independent of their ideology behind privacy. They want to be physically secure and they want their wealth to be secure. So those two, generally speaking, align very well with the argument when people do ask, well, why should I care? I'm not doing anything bad, right? Like, uh, why do I need privacy? Within those two, you usually get a vast majority of people. And those are things that I usually use and I do believe in for why I care about privacy and private coins.
Right. Yep. That's great. That's a great philosophy. It makes sense. Exactly. People don't realize they're sharing not just the present, but the past and the future with transparent cryptos. Well, that's excellent. Well, Reuben, Dr. Cap, what questions do you have for Paul?
Well,
Shoot, Reuben, go for it.
one of the, I guess, growing questions, we're seeing bigger chains, such as Solana and Ethereum, start talking about integrating privacy into their tool stack, right? Like, for example, I think Solana this year, I think, was talking about like confidential balances. Obviously Dash is looking at confidential transactions as well. And now it's like, privacy is starting to be built into this more, I would say, rich ecosystems. How do you see the interplay of the type of privacy features being integrated into big chains, and how does that affect the relevance of, what we call like pure privacy coins? And just kind of, curious on your take on that.
Yeah, so my take on it is, from what I've seen, the integration into privacy chains doesn't provide what I'd call the complete privacy package. And I haven't seen any proposals that do. So confidential transactions hides amounts, but it doesn't hide sender and recipient. And so when I talk about privacy coins, I'm sure what I'm about to say is pretty well known to everyone here on the X Spaces, but hopefully someone can learn something from it. I mean, there's usually a few nuggets to obfuscating transactions. The three primary nuggets are obfuscation of the amounts, right? And that's what confidential transactions provides, but then also obfuscating of the sender. And that's where things like ZK snarks and coin join or other kinds of mixing technologies can help obfuscate who's sending. And then as well, obfuscating the recipient usually is done by something like stealth address technology. The combination of those three embedded into a privacy protocol is what gets you really that complete package of very high level privacy that can't be easily broken through, analytics and whatnot, and especially that connecting graph of who is transacting with who. So all the proposals I've seen have been very, very partial, and I would say doesn't quite obfuscate enough, even in comparison to TradFi. So even if you hide the amounts, knowing who you're transacting with forever, like I send you some Solana with some private, confidential transactions. I can see who you've ever transacted with, every address you've transacted with, and I can see every transaction you will ever transact with, and then vice versa. So that's what I've seen. Anyone, please correct me if I'm wrong, if there have been proposals that have extended beyond that. But
I think you're right, and but I do think that, but I guess like for example like things like Dash. I mean, obviously Dash is not as big as Solana, but I guess it's a little bit better with. I understand it's not a complete
Mhm.
solution, but with a UTXO type of model where you can just like usually use new addresses all the time, right? I guess then that is like a decent, like if you don't do address reuse, it's
It's
more
an improvement.
challenging than this.
It definitely
Yeah.
is a huge improvement. Let me start off with one thing. I'm very excited and happy that those chains are seeing the value, right? So I don't want to belittle the news and the movement. So I'm excited to see that the chains are adhering to that value, but at the same time, I see the value in actual chains that provide complete privacy, right? Those are the ones that will tell the complete story of what I was mentioning very early in the spaces of, you want to be able to hide the transactions and hide who you're transacting with better than TradFi and for your own physical protection. So uh, happy about the movement. Don't think it's quite good enough. And second of all, and this is where this might come as a bit of a criticism to some of the team here, with FIRO and Pivx, um, is that those chains will just about never ever get rid of their transparency mode, right? Where people do transact in transparent fashion. And so the benefit of a lot of the privacy protocols is that many of them are privacy by default, right? So like I know not on this call, but Monero, Zano, Pirate Chain, there's no way to transact in transparent mode. And because of that, you get a higher level of guarantee that just saying, "Oh, I transact with this coin," that you're going to get privacy, as opposed to, "Oh, I transact with this coin, I might get privacy if the other person has it enabled, but I might lose some of that if they don't," and you end up having a bit more of a bifurcated technology. Now, granted, many of those have a far better ability to transition in the future to full privacy by default. Whereas I don't think the Solanas of the world ever will. Like it just simply it's not ever going to be part of the roadmap, especially because of their programmability, smart contracts. A very, very difficult to solve problem of privacy with smart contracts, although I know a few chains that claim to have done so.
Yeah.
So
Agree.
this is where I still lean towards the very, very privacy focused protocols versus, the big chains that are trying to duct tape it onto the side.
That's true, and hopefully, like I don't know. I mean, hopefully, like the adoption of these privacy techs makes it easier for us privacy cons. But it seems, especially with like the MiCA rules, where they're kind of making a distinction between a chain with privacy features versus a coin with inbuilt anonymization, which is a very seemingly arbitrary distinction, but unfortunately has a lot of I would say compliance and listing implications because of the wording of MiCA and the upcoming anti-money laundering rules in Europe. So hopefully it'll normalize privacy a bit. I agree that it's good that these chains are helping to normalize it, but it's also challenging for us because they seem to have like, oh, if you have inbuilt anonymization features, then you're kind of like cut out from a huge swath of the world. Yeah.
No, it's true. And while Micah is inconvenient, to my understanding, that's primarily going to affect exchanges, like centralized exchanges. And the workaround for that is we need to get DEX support across the ecosystem. And of course, we've got Dr. Capper from BasicSwap DEX who could probably chat on
Yeah.
that note. And I'm a big fan. I'm glad to have met over at Likepoint Summit, Dr. Cap, and I'm chatting about BasicSwap DEX with our team, and excited to see that there is one that has a very strong focus on being able to integrate privacy coins, because that circumvents a vast majority of the issues that we might see from regulators. So I think that is a solution, but the biggest solution is less technological and rather more like social, which is the adoption. Once you adopt certain technologies and they're widely in use, then governments won't squash them because they would be shooting themselves in the foot. And I've said this for years. I don't think we've achieved that level of adoption across really any form of cryptocurrency, but definitely not in privacy coins. But if we can, that will protect us more than anything else.
So Paul, I just actually wanted to follow from what you're saying. Firstly, it was an absolute pleasure to kind of meet you sort of face to face at Las Vegas a couple of weeks back and actually kind of chat through things. And kind of going on to that topic of adoption, to give the real life example, Litecoin Summit 2024, they had the father of PGP privacy literally giving a talk, and the point he wanted to make was, look, we need to start lobbying governments to kind of adopt privacy. But actually, if you look at the story he told about PGP, it had become so ubiquitous in terms of its adoption and usage by private enterprises, by businesses, by people, in terms of encrypting the contents of emails, that when governments said, no, we want to get rid of PGP or ban it, actually all these companies pushed back and said, fuck you, in a very blunt terms. And the governments of the world were like, all right, fine, it's already out there. And I kind of thank you for bringing up BasicSwap DEX, because certainly when we were chatting, I noted, took note that you had a focus on user interface and UXP, and I certainly hope that we can bring something that is very easy to use and that can become ubiquitous across, sort of the mobile services of the world. So yeah, thank you for that.
Very welcome. Yeah, very excited about what you guys are building, and I think it's very applicable in this spacing time.
Well, just before we go,
go ahead.
I just wanted
Dr.
to ask you, Paul, with regards to sort of the Edge wallet. So all of that encryption, that's all done client side. So there's no sort of centralized server which is kind of storing that. There's no custodianship in terms of encrypted keys, is there?
Only of encrypted keys, not of decrypted keys. So it's all client side encrypted for sure. So you can think of it as like end-to-end encrypted. But in order to synchronize between your different devices, the encrypted data has to go through our infrastructure.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
And one thing, this is Yenachar. One thing I would add to you made a great point, Paul, about there's this threshold out there of you protect you hide the sender, you hide the receiver, you hide the amount. That's a really important threshold. But I think that I see that threshold as existing in a bigger spectrum of privacy. Privacy is very much a spectrum. Even if you protect those three things, Monero has lots of ongoing technical work, right? They keep wanting to add more decoys or come up with new techniques that more expand the anonymity set, and there's always work against timing attacks and so forth. So all of us are striving, right? But we're striving, and there's a threshold out there, but there's no upper bound. We just keep striving for better privacy. Would be kind of my just something to add to that perspective of that threshold.
I think that is absolutely true. We're striving for like better, more bulletproof privacy. I think the thing that we need to also be striving for is better privacy UX. And I think that's been a bit kind of less focused on.
Explain what you mean by more privacy UX.
So, case in point example, the number one thing that our users complain about with privacy coins is the synchronization time necessary to be able to use wallets, see your funds, spend funds. And that's pretty apparent for us at least. So just for clarification, and full transparency, the privacy coins that Edge has implemented with their full privacy mode, Zcash, Pirate Chain, Monero, and Zano. And so the chains that have any decent amount of adoption, that have, a decent amount of transactions in their blocks, that use that are within those four, Monero and Zcash, right, have a pretty substantial amount of transaction volume. And Zcash, we've implemented with the full sync, where it actually has to download compact blocks from a light wallet D server, and the download and decryption of those blocks takes time. And the worst part is that it takes time that is linear to the amount of blocks since you last synced. And that is a UX that people are not accustomed to in the world of traditional finance. And I think traditional finance should be the UX, the North Star of UX that we should strive for. And never do you ever have to like say, okay, it takes me longer because I haven't looked at my Venmo balance in a while, right? Maybe it takes longer to see all of my Venmo transactions because there are a lot of transactions since I last logged in, but it doesn't take me longer because I haven't opened the app in a while. And so that is a piece of UX that I've been striving to get improved across the different privacy coins. And there are a few proposals out there that can improve that, but albeit with a slight privacy compromise. And that's the piece that this balancing act, I don't think has been looked at carefully enough. Instead, we strive for just these uber like best privacy, but we hinder adoption, which is the thing that protects privacy. If you hinder adoption, who cares how good it is if not enough people are using it and no one's using it, and then the government squash it. And so this is the rhetoric I've really tried to champion, in the different forums and in groups that I'm in for the different privacy protocols. And I know that Monero has a proposal that can improve this. Zcash has a proposal that can improve this, but they just haven't prioritized it because they'd rather do other things. Zcash team would rather integrate Flexa for paying at merchants using a centralized service. Not to throw them under the bus, but I already have personally, told us to their face, like, hey, this is not, I think, the big priority. I think it's go and get the usability of the coin improved. So this is just one example. I think it's one of the main ones that I've talked about. And so hopefully that can be prioritized, in one of these protocols.
That's a fantastic point. It's a great point, and it fits into the spectrum model too. Like you mentioned, if there's a slight sacrifice in privacy, but you get a much better user experience, that may be what fit some needs, right?
Yeah, and
I mean,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I kind of imagine these, like when you mentioned, there's maybe a privacy cost. So are they like maintaining an offline account for the user? Is that how that works to speed up?
Yeah, so I'll give you an idea of what's implemented today. So in Edge, our Monero implementation has a slight privacy compromise in that the view key is given up to a third-party service, My Monero, the service that was founded by Fluffy Pony, Ricardo Spagni, and it was used by the My Monero wallet. And so that gives up the view key. The view key gives up kind of one side of a transaction and its amounts. And someone here, probably Reuben, can recall, but I believe it's the amounts that are outputs of a transaction.
I think it's incoming.
Inputs. Incoming.
You
Right.
only
It's
get the
incoming.
incoming.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. It's incoming incoming inputs and their amounts are given up. But yes, not the outgoing and not the addresses that you are sending to. So that's given up by a view key. The proposals, but that allows a server to know exactly which transactions are yours and not have to sync the blockchain client side. And we've had a number of people mention that they've transitioned into Edge because they couldn't stand waiting for their Monero wallet to sync. Right? They're like, this is such a much better user experience. I can actually transact Monero, and I've gone to even like Monero events where people are sitting there not able to go and buy tacos because they're sitting there waiting for it to sync. And here I am, boom, spend and I'm done. But there is that privacy compromise. The proposals coming out of the Zcash and Monero community are such that you give a key. It's called like a view tag, I think, in Monero, and a detection key in Zcash. And that key given to a server can uniquely identify your transactions that belong specifically to your address, but it doesn't give up anything else. It doesn't know addresses that you've transacted with. and it doesn't know any amounts as well, not incoming, not outgoing amounts. So that to me is the holy grail. There are privacy maximalists that will say, no, 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 that still gives something up, and they're right, it still gives something up. But look at what look at the trade-off of what you get from the viewpoint of an amazing user experience. We look and feel a lot just like an Ethereum wallet, where you have instant sync because you just give the address to the server and it tells you what you got. So that's what I feel like could be the future of privacy coins, that and then make them easily just as usable as any other coin on any cryptocurrency, including transparent chains.
Hello.
Hello, do we
You
lose anyone?
guys got? Yeah, no, I sensed there was a stunning insight. I think, yeah, no, I completely get that. I think there's always going to be some, when you want to get convenience, there's always going to be some compromises. But I think it's just if you can do it in a way that minimizes the degree of compromise, then that's kind of perfect. So yeah, no, I completely, I really appreciate that point of view. I appreciate that approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish
Look,
I had enough of the smarts to be able to work on something like that, but it's out of my scope of skill and our team scope of skill. So we need the smart, encryption, zero knowledge proof type folks to put all that together, and we'd happily use it.
I mean, Paul, I may even go one step. Like I said this on the privacy panel at the Litecoin Summit. It's like, actually, we want to be delivering services where people are just adopting them and they don't even necessarily need to know that privacy is built in. So that to me is like that gold standard to reach to. It's like people are just using these, regular people. They're just, oh yeah, this is definitely the service to use. And we've built the UX so well that the privacy is built in to the point that it doesn't even need to be a selling point. That's kind of my take home, as that's the ideal. At the moment, I guess I hate saying that, as an industry or as technologists, we are selling privacy, but I hope to live in a future where we don't even have to sell privacy as a feature. That just comes on by default without end users even knowing it. Something almost to the point that everyday people take that for granted, because those tend to be the most successful services, are the ones that people just naturally take for granted. I could list a few, but that's how I feel anyway on this subject.
No, I 100% agree. It's the exact rhetoric that I've been giving at most of my talks on privacy, and I'll list those few like Signal. Right? I use it between friends and family members when we go on trips, and now I have friends like absolutely out there, not in the privacy space. These are the absolute normies that use it, and they create their own Signal groups for various topics, and they don't know. They don't need to know that it provides a better level of privacy. It just has a good UX. And so I champion the effort that Signal has gone through. And I hate to say it, but I also, because of that, I also usually, I don't call it look down on, but I don't appreciate some of the higher level privacy tools that people promote because they say Signal isn't private enough. Right? They're like, oh, no, 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 Signal not private enough. I use this other tool, this other one. And I've used them and saying that I would never introduce my friends to these. These are terrible user experience. You feel
Are
like
you
you're
talking
using a
about
hackathon project.
Simplex?
Well, okay, all right, you said it. So that's on the list, but there's many. I mean, and many of these are built by developers who are very smart and know privacy and they know encryption really well, but it hasn't gone through that maturation process of getting UX designers to actually streamline the application. And some of them just may have actual limits because of the way the privacy is implemented, right? It's just not going to feel as smooth to be able to find people and connect with people. So yeah, I like championing the usable products as opposed to championing the uber privacy products because I just can't recommend them to most of my friends and family.
That's true, but I think it's also important that they exist, right? Like, for those people higher threat level, in a way, it's like almost like a similar argument with privacy coins, right? It's like, yeah, you can have like kind of good privacy on, like, let's say, like, these confidential amounts and stuff like that. But if you want like really high privacy, even if it does perhaps come with some, UX drawbacks, especially when compared to that, then you have those options, right? And I guess that's kind of similar where I would say that, yeah, I agree. Signal is great for, I would say, like, 90% of the population or something like that. But if you want like really high privacy, But for those people who need something, a little bit better and whatnot, like actually met someone who does Hawala, and he operates like he swears off Signal. I don't really know. He was trying to explain to me, and it was like Simplex is the best because of this, and I was like, okay, great. I may not necessarily appreciate or agree, but I'm happy that there are tools for people who need it, right? And it's good to have I guess like alternative approaches, right? Yeah.
Yeah, my take, and in no way am I trying to discourage the people that are building the tools like a Simplex, because I look back, and if anyone here used, Signal back when it was Open Whisper systems, it was terrible. It was a horrible app, right? But it has the ability to improve over time, just like the privacy coins have the ability to improve their UX over time. So do other apps like, Signal and whatnot. And so I champion their effort. I'm just not going to recommend them today, right? It's simple as that. I'll keep my eye on it. I might try it every year or so, but I'm not going to be the person that recommends it today for general adoption. But sure, they can improve. I hope they do, because the ability to have even a higher level of privacy, and be usable is something that I definitely want to champion. So yeah, no, please keep building some of the what I call terrible UX apps, but then look at improving them, such that we get your better privacy, but also have the adoptability.
I do want to do like a public service announcement that, yeah, I use and love Telegram, but no, don't expect any privacy from Telegram. When Telegram has your keys, can decrypt it unless you use their funky homebrewed, secret one-on-one chat. So don't forget, I would say 99.99% of chats on Telegram don't have meaningful privacy, and whoever controls Telegram can decrypt them. Just a quick reminder, because I remember Telegram really promotes itself as a privacy messenger, and often, a lot of nefarious actors use it thinking that this is, or even like people who are protesting or rioting, like in Hong Kong riots, they were using Telegram, and it's really not the right tool for those type of situations. So I want to remind people that Telegram is not private, despite what it says. Yeah.
Right. Great
absolutely.
PSA. And actually, and that might be a good transition. One thing we wanted to cover in this space, is we're 40 minutes in, is the impact of AI on privacy. And we can just transition as it fits right into this. The more information there is, the more AI can look through it. And I know, Dr. Cap, you had some thoughts you wanted to convey on the use of AI.
Yeah, so this actually follows the 2025 Litecoin Summit. So I was actually chatting to one of the Pirate Chain team at that banquet that, Paul, you gave a very lovely speech at, and that we had a chat at. And one of the discussions I was having was, there was a talk given at the summit by Jameson Lopp, and it was about social engineering attacks to obtain the private keys, or social engineering and wrench attacks to obtain the private keys for wealthy people who have most of their net worth locked up in cryptocurrency. For those who don't know, wrench attacks is literally like finding out where someone lives, breaking into their house, holding literally a wrench to their head and saying, I'm going to beat you over the head repeatedly until you give me your private key, and I might kill you if you don't, so give me your private key. So that's like coercion by force, or the use of force. And then social engineering is, oh, hey, we're Coinbase support. We noticed that your Coinbase account may have been kind of hacked. Please, can you just give us your private keys so we can double check it against our system? And Jameson Lopp, he was at 2024 talking about wallet security, and he's giving this general talk about how do we protect ourselves against social engineering and wrench attacks. And a lot of the things he was basically saying were, just don't give up your private key. Like I felt like the take home was, look out for when someone is saying something dodgy to you, and then if it sounds not right, then don't give them your private key, as in don't ever give your private key. But the thing he kept pointing out was that there would be so many people that would contact these victims of these sort of attacks, and they would just give up their private keys. And it wasn't like, people who didn't understand this. This is people who've been around in cryptocurrency, you're prior to 2014, you know, so people who've been around for a decade plus, who understand the underlying architecture, who understand the importance of not giving up your private key, but somehow being persuaded to do that. And when I was kind of, I think it was Amy, her name, but she was at Pirate Chain. So I was chatting to this person, and I was like, you know what? Wouldn't it be great if we could like have, I just thought to myself, look, the future is going to be this. You're going to get AI agents or LLMs or advances on LLMs that are going to be much more sophisticated and going to be much better at potentially impersonating people that you know in order to kind of conduct social engineering attacks on behalf of the people who've essentially engineered their prompts or directives. And then on the flip side to that, I thought, actually, wouldn't it be great if I could have a locally hosted instance of an AI that, and this is local, running on my own network. It's not kind of a trusted service in any way. This is basically my own instance of some kind of AI that's actively monitoring the communications that go in and out of my network and actually going, hang on a second, perhaps, you know, this line of communication sounds a bit dodgy. You know, perhaps this is like a social engineering attack. Don't give them this information they're requesting, or pause if you do. And I thought, actually, this may be a more viable future. So I felt like, I know there's a lot of reliance on the individual to be aware of what social engineering attacks look like, but is there a way to utilize locally run instances of helpers effectively, or can we run agents that can assist in this process? So I thought I'll leave it to the floor for you guys to kind of dwell on.
I was a target of very sophisticated attack, which I think is probably too long to share here, but basically, like, so talking about, like, you know, local AI, I guess I was, you know, I'm of the same category. Yeah, local AI is great, but several things that happened to me over the past couple of days has made me a bit more hesitant on it. Okay, like for example, let's just quickly talk about Windows Recall, which is a feature that Windows has been trying to push, and it claims to be, you know, totally local, you know, and it's totally encrypted, and, you know, other users can't access it and stuff like that. And this is like Microsoft, right? One of the largest companies in the world, brilliant engineers, and they claim all these things, right? And Windows Recall was supposed to allow you to kind of like, oh, what did I do on this computer, like last thing? And it automatically kind of logs everything that you do. It even takes screenshots of the apps that you open and stuff like that, and that uses it to power a local AI. The problem is that actually when they looked into it, at least in the first version of the Windows Recall, a lot of these claims were not true. They were not encrypted. It was only encrypted with what do you call it? What's that? Is it Bitdefender? No, not Bitdefender. The what's the Windows encryption that is called? Well, it was only.
Is it basically weak encryption?
Oh, it's not weak encryption. It's just that it was I forgot the name of it. Anyway, a side point. But basically, like, if your computer is unencrypted, you can actually like go into the folder and you just change the extension, and bang, you see the screenshots. And
oh wow, it's all like plain text.
Yes, it's all plain text, and the images are all plain text and everything. So it's just like, what the heck, right? And for me, my computer was compromised over an interview through a screen share, and a Trojan was downloaded that extracted stuff from my computer. Now, just imagine my computer was compromised, and they just look into that folder, and they don't even need to install a keylogger. They just go into that freaking folder and extract all the information there for the AI.
Right, you're logging your own keys.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
They have everything, and that made me like, oh, you know, I like, look, if Windows and Microsoft can literally lie barefaced to us about this, and you know how they always like, oh, we've changed our privacy policy, and we're like forced to accept it. I mean, yeah, now they say it's local, we won't upload it and whatnot. One day they'll be like, oh, we have a new service. Are you going to read the privacy notice? And now we can share it with, you know, authorized, blah, 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 blah. We wouldn't know, right? So, yeah, it's just like, just like kind of like a PSA that to be really careful, because sometimes we think, oh, it's local, it's going to be safe and whatnot, but as we have seen, attacks are, it's only as good as until someone attacks you, and for me especially, they really crafted their attack to me. AI makes research of a person so much easier, and these new type of attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. And right now, that interview with me, the fake interview, had 45 minutes of footage of my voice, my facial, everything. They could easily, basically use a AI creator. And even one of the largest banks, or the largest bank in Malaysia, the CFO was actually tricked by like AI generated like Zoom things, and actually transferred, I think it's a couple of $1 million, and luckily was caught. But it goes to show that, AI and all these things are making all these scams a lot easier, and attacks that seem really sophisticated in the past are a lot easier today because of this too. So I will end my rant there.
Right, faking voice is unbelievably trivial, right? You just need 45 minutes is way more than what's needed to fake voice. You can't trust voice.
I will share the link of the whole story in the comments here.
Yes. Well, I haven't ever been subject to an intensive attack like that, but I have gotten like spear phishing attacks, like with a company. You get an email and it's coming from somebody else in the company who would be normally making the request, and it's unsettling, and you have to rely on. There's an element of luck. You pick up something's odd in the email. This isn't the way this person usually addresses me, or something like that. But the more like there's AI, and the more that information is shared, the better targeted like spear phishing attacks will be, and the more persuasive they will be. And it's a real concern, and it's something to be thinking forward about, because where people tend to get tricked is when they get hit by a technology they're not quite ready for, right? We think of ourselves as sophisticated, but if there's something we don't know can even be done yet, and we get hit with it, we might get tricked. So it's a good thing to keep in mind, Dr. Cap. Paul, how does AI factor into the work you're doing?
It's definitely made our job a bit harder from the viewpoint of scams. We noticed before AI, a lot of people that call us because they got scammed um, would show us the thread of the conversation they'd have with a scammer, and it always was, "Gosh, look at that really bad broken English," and like, "Where's this person really from?" Even though their name might be
Right.
John Smith, and now it's perfect. Like that conversation looks and sounds legitimate. We haven't dealt with someone getting AI scammed via a voice impersonation, just kind of like a text stop. But obviously, we don't expect that one happens pretty soon because of how effective it is. I'm one of the bigger bears on AI. When I say bear, I don't mean that it won't have value and won't make people a lot of money. I'm bigger on the bear that it's a net positive to society, because there's so many detriments to it, and this is clearly one of them. But it's here to stay, and we have to just kind of manage and deal with it. And so I'd say one of the things that I generally tell people to consider in their life, to prevent from being, I don't necessarily call it, yeah, somewhat scammed, fished, is that all of the stuff that you use to determine that you're communicating with someone that historically has been um, just it's been pattern matching is all it's been. Like, oh, you sound like that person, you look like that person, you say things in a mannerism of that person. We need to migrate off doing those things and using those type of tools to actual secrets, shared secrets between us. So like my family, we have specific shared secrets that are not public information. And only by using those shared secrets can you ensure you are talking to the right person. So companies should have shared secrets between their staff members. Families should have shared secrets. So if you get a phone call, someone's asking you to send Bitcoin to them, you can have a high level of assurance it's actually that person via shared secrets, and not publicly known information such as the intonation and wording and sound of someone's voice or even their look. So that's the one nugget that I'd push on to listeners, is to start having that, because yes, AI can fake just about any digital communication and likeliness. And even if you ask personal information of somebody, if it's something that can be extrapolated from travel records, like asking, oh, where do we go on vacation on this date and time? Well, AI can find that out as well, right? So have personal secrets between each other that you can use for authenticating between each other.
Wow, Paul, you're an AI bear. That's very very interesting and unique. What other things about AI worry you?
I think it's kind of changing our humanity from the viewpoint of like creativity. I know that AI is starting to replace a lot of the creative arts. Or obviously, people are using it for AI, Gen AI type of artwork and writing. It's the teachers are struggling to be able to teach kids how to write essays because, well, they just plop it into AI and then boom, out comes a beautiful sounding essay. And so, while that might seem all in good, and I'm a technologist, so I've always felt like technology does replace some of our brain power, but then we instead use different parts of our brain, to leverage the tools, right? That's kind of how we've been. Like we don't we use calculators now, so we can think of higher level math versus trying to figure out how to add two large numbers. Um, but at the end of the day, with respect to creativity, I have the concern that we're going to take a bunch of potential creatives in our world and squash them out and turn them into programmers, which they're not really meant to do, because we're in such dire need of developers that the people that shouldn't be developers, that would have been creatives, but then kind of got squashed out of that creativity because AI now lets the marketing director of a company who's not a creative generate enough of the content that they need, and they don't actually have to lean on artists. That's somewhat of my concern of AI. And there's a handful, and obviously the scamming is another one, but it, uh, it generally speaking has what I would consider to be a net negative effect. That people say, oh, well, I save time. Well, no, you don't, because you're still going to work your 40 hours a week. No one's going to say, oh, with AI, just work 1 day a week. You can get everything done. That's never going to happen. We just expect more out of people, and that's been the truth of technology. Technology saves time, but it only saves time in the thing you were doing. It just changes what you then need to do. We just expect more out of people. And so, yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of AI, because a lot of people are very excited about it. A lot of people are building companies around it. So I don't want to be that perma bear, but admittedly, I am concerned.
Right, I can see that. Yeah, of course. I mean, artists, think of how they've been under pressure from technology in other ways too. I mean, even the ability to record and replay songs. Think what that did to musicians, right? So everybody just listens to the best musicians recorded rather than live musicians. And so it's we can see the impact technology has had in the past, and it has had negative as well as positive impacts. It's a good point.
Well, I just want to say on this conversation, there's a lot of good points. In Monerotopia 2023, I kind of gave a speech, and we kind of prepared it. And actually, one of my colleagues, a good friend as well, like it took about half an hour for an AI to basically figure out how to replicate his voice, his intonation, and his speaking style. This is 2023. It still sounded robotic, but within half an hour, I think he had to like train it for about an hour or two, but it was good enough to go, oh, this is replicable. And when Reuben was sort of talking about, my thought was, one day, are we going to have like one of these privacy roundtables? And I think, I'm talking to you actual guys as humans, but actually you've all got designated LLMs that just sound and intonate like perfect renditions of yourselves.
And you're the only real person
what I mean?
here.
Exactly. Is it going to be like, are we going to be suddenly delegating like all these tasks? Before we came into this today, I was like thinking of the movie WALL-E, the Disney movie WALL-E, and how the ending, it turns out like all the humans built all these robots and then delegated every activity to them. And now the humans became so dependent because they delegated so much that they were just kind of morbidly obese and kind of stuck to their chairs and unable to physically move. And it kind of touches on Paul's bearishness, which is that this idea that actually, is this going to do we have a corporate structure that basically favors obtaining creative input from AIs rather than human beings? And is that going to then result in a society where humans aren't encouraged or incentivized to be creative in their thinking? And that's really worrying, because to me, I feel like if humans aren't incentivized to be creative in their thinking or imaginative, then how can they actually conceive of new worlds, new thoughts, new ideologies, new technologies, new things? Like, this has been the impetus of humankind from its like inception. It's what's got us to where we are now. It's actually what's got us to the point of building AIs, was the fact that we were able to actually imagine these things to begin with. Like, if you read H.G. Wells, I'm not a great reader, but like, I think H.G. Wells is a great example. Like, you look at like, what, God, man, my brain is, I'm so tired. But, I think of all the different aspects of sci-fi futurism and all of the different technologies they posited. And, it's like people imagine these things first before they're created. It even touches back on what we were talking with, like the privacy technologies. It's like, look, you can have simplex versus, signal, and simplex may have better privacy, but it's just much more niche because it's more complex. And, going back, signal back in the day was, the UX was terrible. But you have to imagine these things and then build towards them. But if humanity loses that aspect, then what do we have left? It's not what was intended from this talk, but it's a valid point to go down, of course, to pursue.
Right. Yep, good points. Well, we're coming up on the hour. One thing we wanted to get in, Dr. Cap, is your work on adding Litecoin. Did you want to make a mention of that?
Oh no!
To
BasicSwap
BasicSwap?
DEX is coming to mobile services. So we're basically enabling atomic swaps for mobile and web devices, and we're doing that in a way that does not compromise on privacy and security. So we're building a swap style service that is almost fully decentralized, but just as private and secure as our home version of BasicSwap DEX, which will allow for atomic swaps on mobile platforms. One of our first integrating partners is going to be with the Litecoin Foundation via their Nexus wallet, which is kind of their de facto wallet for Litecoin. And we're going to basically be building a service that's similar to Changelly or Shapeshift or StealthX, but whereas those are centralized services, this is much more decentralized and much more private. There's no KYC, much more secure. So we're doing a crowdfund through Litecoin, and they basically it's like a $75,000 target. But every dollar raised is matched 1-to-1 by Charlie Lee. So if we can get to like a $37,000 raise, that will get us to our target, and that will basically help keep the lights on, or certainly help keep our devs from a restrictive diet of ramen until sort of December, January time, when this should be pretty much finished. So if you guys are able to post the links, I'll certainly put the link. I'll pin the link as well. But any donations would be really welcome to that, and they'll accept sort of multiple currencies. So it's not just Litecoin. So it could be like Monero or US dollars or FIRO or Pivx or various other things. So whatever you guys are able to donate, that'd be really welcome. So thank you. Thanks for giving me the shout out there.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Cap. Sounds good. And yes, please post the link. Okay, well, that's the hour. We'll wrap it up there. Paul, thank you very much for joining us. It was really wonderful getting your insights.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This is a great chat.
And thank you. And Reuben, Dr. Cap, thank you. We'll close it there. Bye.
Much appreciated, guys. And thanks once again, Paul, for joining us.